right, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to the 2023 St. Clair County Community Mental Health Recovery Summit. We're very excited because today's September 1st, which means it's the kickoff of our Recovery Summit that goes all through September. And we're very excited to have our first presenter, Dr. Flores, today for our kickoff. So again, good morning, welcome. The Recovery Summit that you're going to see today and all month of September is presented by St. Clair County Community Mental Health with support from the St. Clair County Health Department. Today's presentation is Recovery Focused Nutrition, presented by Dr. Anna Flores. Before we begin, we're going to go over a couple of housekeeping items for folks that are not maybe familiar with Zoom or that are familiar with Zoom. So please use the chat feature down below for all questions and all comments. So we want everything to be able to come through the chat filter. Dr. Flores will be able to answer questions as they come in and as time allows. So go ahead and enter any kind of comments or questions that you have in the chat feature, and we'll go ahead and address those with our presenter. Today's presentation offers one social work CE and one McBAP credit. If you're requesting professional credits on your registration, you must remain on the webinar for the entire time for the credit. And at any time you happen to lose connection with your computer or anything else, just reconnect as soon as you're able, and we'll be able to see that. Also, it's real important for us to get your feedback. We also would like at the very end of today, as soon as the webinar is over, a survey will pop up. Please complete that. It'll pop up at the conclusion of the webinar today. And we really appreciate your feedback. And for those of you that are requesting social work CEs, the completion of the survey is very important for you to be able to get your professional credits. So with that, we're going to introduce our presenter of today. Dr. Anna Flores is a doctor of clinical nutrition specializing in eating disorder treatment. She currently works as a clinical liaison for Sanford Behavioral Health. In her role, she supports clinical professionals, sufferers, families, and supports alike in better serving the eating disorder community through the connection to care, clinical skill development, and education. She also does outreach. Her professional mission is to empower others to cultivate to nourish a positive relationship with food and body to be able to support lasting recovery. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put the floor over to Dr. Flores. Good morning, Dr. Flores.
Thank you for having me. So today we're going to be talking about recovery-focused nutrition with special considerations for substance use and eating disorders. I'm an eating disorder specialist. However, Sanford Behavioral Health has eating disorder and substance use treatment on our behavioral health campus. And so for the past year and a half, I've also been working with the substance use population and learning quite a bit. And I'm hoping to talk about both the similarities and differences when it comes to nourishing your body for recovery. So before I talk about nutrition or health, it kind of doesn't matter who I'm talking to. I always like to start in the same place. I think this just helps to provide some perspective on the context of this field and of this conversation. Before we really dig in, I just want to make sure that we all start kind of from the same place. So when I say what we're taught versus what I've learned, what I mean is what we're taught as nutrition professionals. So this is things that, like, when I say we, I'm talking about the clinical community, but also what we're taught as patients within the healthcare system, which is this kind of dynamic that the more you know, the more it will influence your choices and behaviors and influence change. The more it will then impact your weight, shape, and size. That will then in turn impact your health. And why is that important? Because the pursuit of health is the pursuit of value. So working to be healthy is how you increase your value in society. So this dynamic, like I said, this is what I was taught in school for a very long time. It's how I practiced early days. It's also my experience as on the other side, right? As a patient in the healthcare system. I now want to kind of shift the conversation to what I've learned. So through my years of practice and experience working with the recovery population and also just the general public, as well as my own growth and exploration into internal biases. I want to kind of break this down. So I usually start here and I kind of ask everybody in the space to reflect on if this feels congruent with kind of the dynamic that they experience when they're with healthcare providers or when they are treating and working with patients, right? Like, if my patients just know better, if I can just give them enough information and knowledge, they'll make the changes and that will impact their weight, shape, and size and their health. And, that's important for all these reasons. Who has known better and still made the same choice? Right. So hold on then. Maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it's not that direct. Maybe the relationship is not, well, you just have to know better and you'll do everything right, right? Because we've all known better and maybe still made a choice that we knew was not the best choice for us, or still used a behavior that we know is not the best behavior for our recovery or for our health or for our family or for the life that we're living. So there's that piece right there where maybe it's not so cut and dry, and maybe the experience as a patient or the experience as a provider in maintaining that dynamic of, well, you just need to know enough and you will change, is inherently defeating. Because it's not that simple. And then on top of it, there is all of this knowledge out there that people can access, right, at the click of a mouse, at the touch of a button. And it seems to be pretty contradictory, especially when it comes to nutrition, right? So for every reputable source that says, don't eat eggs, they're bad for your heart, there are just as many that say, do eat eggs, they're good for your heart. So on top of it, how are you supposed to sift through all of that and utilize knowledge to inform your choices and behaviors to make these changes when everything is there's so much out there? So personally, yes, I was taught this dynamic, but what I've learned is it can be very inherently defeating. Especially for someone who is suffering from substance use or an eating disorder or any health condition, really, to have to face this idea of like, but I knew better and I'm still doing it, something's wrong with me. And that logic, although it seems pretty clear, is false, right? It's not the whole truth. There is something more there. And so personally, I've shifted my approach to not necessarily push this association, which can be much more empowering. The next piece, right? Our choices, our behaviors, the things we do, the way we live our lives, the way we eat, all the things, right? Those are going to directly impact our weight, shape, and size. Again, this is how I practiced. Yes and no, right? Can we eat our way to a smaller shoe size or a larger shoe size? Or can I eat enough, carrots or move my body in a certain way and be 6 feet tall? No, right? So there is this idea that health is, you have full autonomy and choice over your weight, shape, and size and over your health status. But that isn't quite true when we start to pick it apart and examine it. I can't change my, adjust my choices and change my behaviors and have blue eyes or be in a smaller body or in a larger body or, have longer legs or shorter legs or whatever it is. So again, it's one of those like, well, kind of, but also kind of no. There is so much more at play when it comes to our weight, shape, and size. And that is, I say health status too, but those are different things, right? But there's so much more when it comes to our weight, shape, and size than just our choices and our behaviors, particularly when it comes to our ability to influence and or control that thing. So again, pushing that dynamic onto patients and also being on the other side of it as a patient and feeling that dynamic is very frustrating because again, it creates this defeating mindset, this train of logic, the story in our minds that we tell ourselves about ourselves, which is, but I know everything, I know the things, I'm doing the things, I'm making the changes, I'm whatever it is with my choices. And maybe your weight, shape, and size isn't changing and you think I'm broken, I'm the problem. When actually it's not that simple. It's much more biologically complex. And at the end of the day, we don't get 100% autonomy and the final say with what our weight, shape, and size looks like in our body. And we know this, right, when it comes to so many other biological features. And for some reason, we decide it doesn't apply to that one thing, right? We know we can't control the color of our eyes, or, you know, how tall we are, or how the color of our hair, or how, you know, if we lose our hair earlier or later in life, or, you know, there are maybe some things that may or may not influence that in some small way, but we don't get to choose. And so again, just bringing some perspective that we sometimes seem to forget. We sometimes seem to forget this when it comes to our weight, shape, and size. We sort of throw it out the window and say, no, but when it comes to my weight, I've got full control and everything I do will be directly influential to that thing. And then our weight, shape, and size and our health, I kind of jumped ahead, right? There's kind of a pattern here. Maybe they're all not so perfectly directionally connected, and there's more to the story. When it comes to our weight, shape, and size and our health status, we are told that those things are directly linked. And, you know, I guess mutually exclusive is the term, right? Like they exist together and they're intricately tied. It's another one of those kind of, but kind of not. Is our weight, shape, and size going to impact certain health outcomes? Maybe. But is that direct connection that clear? Not necessarily. Obesity as a term is a highly complex process and, you know, kind of condition. I don't really like to say obesity as a condition, but that idea of somebody being obese, it is deeply rooted in anti-fatness and internal biases surrounding our own opinions, generally negative, towards weight, shape, and size. And so to attach it to health status, again, kind of gets it twisted. So I started by saying, you know, who's known better and made the same choice, right? Ugh, guilty. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a different body size and reflected on what your health status was. So for some of the clients, most of the clients that I work with, they might be at the lowest weight they've been in their life, and a quote unquote maybe healthy weight, or, you know, they appear thin or whatever it is, and they are actually the sickest they've ever been, right? And have multiple health conditions impacting multiple biological systems and organ systems in their body. So there's that idea, right? I've had, you know, people share in the substance use disorder community during groups say, you know, yeah, I looked the picture of health, right, in terms of being thin when I was in my substance use disorder, and I actually wasn't feeding myself and was using substances, right? I had one client who, you know, they said, oh, please share my story when people are trying to unpack this connection between weight and health, and let them know, like, I had a very expensive daily heroin addiction, and people didn't know and told me, you know, you're so thin, how do I look like you? And my body was rotting from the inside out, right? Was so sick and needed so much healing. And yet, so there's this thing, right? There's this, do we have some information that talks about the relationship between weight, shape, and size and health? Yes. Is all of that necessarily great information or truthful information? That's stuff that we are continuing to unpack, but we do know that it's not perfectly direct. And sometimes the means with which people use to manipulate their weight, shape, and size and attain this look of health are actually at the detriment of their physical health and deeply unhealthy and non-health supportive behaviors, right? Drugs, alcohol, eating disordered behaviors, right? Excessive restriction, exercise, things that actually hurt our body in the name of weight loss. And so it's a very slippery slope and a very sticky situation to keep those things so intimately tied in our brains and kind of unpacking them, right? I'm in the largest body size that I've been in my life thus far. Bodies change, worth doesn't, right? This is where I am in my life. And this is the body that allows me to participate fully in my life. I've never felt like I've lived a healthier life before. You know, I actively participate in my job and doing this and talking to others about this work and working with patients and, you know, visiting my family and playing with my niece and all these things. When I was in a smaller body and in my eating disorder, I was not able to do any of these things. So sometimes, interestingly enough, right, it does go the other way. So we say, oh, but weight loss improves health outcomes. Sometimes weight gain improves health outcomes too. And if that's the case, then maybe this relationship is not as perfect as we thought. And then this last bit, health equals value. So I'm pursuing health to, increase my value. That's how I'm valuable in society. I have to be able and healthy and strong and doing all these things, right? Are babies who are born differently abled less valuable? Are people that we know who are in a wheelchair or blind or hearing impaired or whatever it might be, right? Just have different abilities. Do we find them to be less valuable? Are our interactions with those people less meaningful? Are their contributions to the world less meaningful? Every single group of people that I ask this question to give me a resounding no. Oh my God, no. My child that was born the way that they were born is just as valuable as anybody else. But something kind of gets lost along the way when we grow up, right? That we start to, again, like get it twisted here. So health and value, separate things, right? Human value, and this is my own personal belief system that I'm bringing in, so it doesn't apply. You let it fly, but I believe that human value is innate. It is something that is just there in all of us from the beginning. And health is separate from that, right? Health may or may not, our idea of health may be different. So I like to start really taking some time to build some perspective before we really get into it. Okay, but what is health then? If it's not my value, how do I find it or connect with it? So this is based off of some really fantastic research about the social determinants, about the determinants of health in various populations. So interestingly enough, 40% of a population's health is actually based on socioeconomic factors. So education status, job status, family and social support, right? Income, community safety, all of that can be traced back to socioeconomic factors, and all of those things are going to impact your health. 10% is going to be physical environment. So where do you live, right? What's the air quality? What's the water quality? Environmental quality on a larger scale, like I said, in terms of air and water quality and those things, but also access to green space. And do you have lead paint or asbestos insulation, right? All of these things, those play a factor. And so right off the bat, we've actually spoken about 50% of a population's health can be traced back to their zip code. This is huge, right? So society tells us, or we tell ourselves, or, insert that messaging system here, right? Or telling us you have every single say in your health. And if your health status is not, quote unquote, the ideal, it's your fault. But actually, right off the bat, 50% actually is impacted by where we live as a population, right? Where we live. 30% health behaviors. So substance use, what we eat, how we move, our sexual activity and sexual health, our sleep hygiene, our rest and relaxation, our coping skills, right? Our stress management, all of these things. So, and all of those share that 30%. So it's not, what I eat is 30% of my health. Granted, this is population research, so we can't say that it applies to the individual perfectly. That would be lazy science. But we can think about how, as individuals collectively in a population, all of this stuff makes sense. And so there is some use of application for us to think about in our own lives and our community. But yeah, and it's not, okay, so, my eating disorder clients will say, 30%, that's how I eat. And I'm like, no. Again, let's not attach and get it twisted. It's what you eat. It's how you move. It's if you're sleeping, if you're managing your stress, if you're giving yourself rest, if you're experiencing relaxation, if you're utilizing substances, right? If you were sexually safe, all of these things, they all are encompassed in this 30%. I had a statistician, a colleague of mine who really likes statistics, who said, let me just break it down. Even if all of these counted evenly, diet, like how you ate and how you moved, would only account for about 2 to 5% of that 30%. And that's if all of those things counted equally. So just to build some perspective, right? And then the last 20% is healthcare. So our access to healthcare and the quality of that healthcare. So when we think about, again, the first slide and how I started out of saying, there's this interesting message that's pushed that says we're into our choices and our behaviors will directly impact our weight, shape, and size, will directly impact our health, right? I don't know if any of you have heard of blue zones, these areas where people have very long lifespans, right? Living to 80, 90, 100. I'm always seeing every couple of years some new product or diet book that's trying to sell how to eat like they do in a blue zone, and then you too will live 100 years, right? But let's look at this. If you'd like to experience the benefits of a blue zone, well, if 50% of a population's health can be traced back to the zip code, you have to actually live in that area first and foremost. If you actually wanted to make the biggest impact, you'd move to a blue zone, right? So there's something about the region that's impacting health, not just the individual and their choices and behaviors, but the area at large. And it is these other things, right? Maybe there's differences in education, job status, community safety, social support, right? Access to healthcare, their physical environment, right? What water quality, air quality, pollution, all these things. So again, building that perspective, there are so many things that come into play when we think about health, right? When we think about all of this, and to just come in here and start by saying like, everybody get healthy and eat these things, I would be making the same mistakes that the past me had made so many times. And it, again, just perpetuates this inherently defeating thing, which is why diets don't work, right? They come in and say, hey, just eat like this and this will happen. And people try and they fail. No, they do not fail. They are failed by this false logic and this incomplete and incorrect understanding of how our bodies work and how health works, right? And how all these things work. And again, this is my own personal belief system coming into the room. I will not do that to anybody anymore. The second it started to kind of click, I'll never do it to someone again. So this is the perspective. These are kind of all of the moving pieces. But I did say we were going to talk about nutrition for recovery, and we absolutely are. I started, by saying I'm a doctor of clinical nutrition. It's my life's work. It is important. So I'm not trying to say that, these things aren't important. They are working in harmony with all of these other things. And maybe these other things are not things that we have 100% control and say in, right? We can't just up and move. I couldn't, right? I can't just up and move. I can't, change how much money I make today, right? I can hopefully, try. I'd like to think I'm building towards something, right? And always improving, but I can't just walk in and say, I need to make more money, or I can't, move or change my education status or my community. If I don't feel safe in my community, I'm not going to be able to change that tomorrow, right? If I don't have access, I'm going to go back because I'm talking about it still. If I don't have access to healthcare, I can't just suddenly make those things appear. So there are all of these things, and there are ways to work within these systems to find solutions for ourselves. It's not totally defeating, but there's just so many pieces that we can be mindful of. And so I guess building grace around, hey, if you're doing your best, it's okay. If, adjusting, if not using substances is a big thing that you've made in your health behaviors, that's incredible. But you're still thinking, hey, I don't want to touch how I'm feeding myself or how I'm moving. That's okay. You've done great work. There are other things that you can focus your attention and energy on, right? Like researching if there's access to better healthcare in your area, and then utilizing those services instead, right? You don't have to work on all of these things at once either. So nutrition. This is a nutritional priorities pyramid. This is how I start working with any client. Doesn't matter who they are. They apply to adults, kiddos, anyone. And it starts at the bottom here with adequacy. So first and foremost, we're starting with adequate nutrition. What does that mean? Enough, right? What's adequacy? It's enough. Are you getting enough? If you are privileged to adequate nutrition on a consistent basis, right? Enough food on a consistent basis and food security, we move forward, right? But if that is still something that you are struggling with, you do not collect $200, you do not pass go, right? We stay there until we find a way for you to nourish your body and get enough. Once we get to enough, we think about balance. So I talked about these kind of as a step-by-step, but we can also be working on these at the same time. So maybe while we're focusing on, hey, let's get enough, we do start thinking about balance, right? Or maybe that is the priority. Like, we're not thinking about balance until we get adequacy, right? With my eating disorder patients, sometimes I have to hold that boundary of, we don't get to talk about balance until we get enough. Then we'll move on. For kiddos, we usually talk about them at the same time. So we want you to have enough and it needs to be balanced, right? Because there's a lot more growth and development happening in a child and adolescent body than an adult body. Adult bodies is more growth and repair. So balance, then we talk about balanced nutrition. So what is balanced nutrition? It's our considerations for kind of our macronutrients, our food groups. So proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Are you getting those, right? And then those food groups that sort of fall underneath those categories. So proteins, right? We've got meats. Those are usually what we think of for proteins, right? We also have forms of plant-based proteins, tofu, beans, those things, right? Fats, so oils that you might be adding, avocado, coconut, olives, right? You can use those as oils or eat those foods. And then we're thinking about carbohydrates. So those are going to be our grains and starches, some of our fruits and vegetables. So we've kind of got all of our food groups here. Dairy sort of falls under fat and sometimes can give you protein. So that's balance, right? Are you eating foods from all the food groups? Or are you eating proteins, fats, and carbohydrates? Right. So let's say that we chose a plate of food. It's lunch and it's nutritionally adequate. So it's enough food for you to be nourished for lunch for that meal. And the plate is perfectly balanced. Let's use an example of some kind of variation of chicken, right? That's our protein. It's our, animal meat food group. We've got rice. That's our grain food group. Those are our carbohydrates. We've got fruits and vegetables. Let's say we've got broccoli and maybe like half an apple. That's probably sounds nice to me. And you've put butter on your rice. There's skin on the chicken. Maybe there's cheese on the broccoli. So we're getting, dairy. We're getting our fats, our fruits, vegetables, all the things. Perfect plate. If we could make one up. If we ate that every single day for every single meal, yes, we're eating enough and it's balanced. But what are we missing out on? We're missing out on variety. Why is variety important? One, because most people say I'd get bored of that, right? So that's one thing. But two, aside from the macronutrients, right, the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, foods contain micronutrients. So vitamins, minerals, right? Different amino acids that build those proteins, different dietary fatty acids that make up those fats, different, carbohydrates that make up that carbohydrate. So those are the things that we start to miss out on, those micronutrients, when we're not eating with variety. So the same amount of grams of protein, let's say 20 grams of protein of chicken versus 20 grams of protein of eggs versus 20 grams of proteins of tofu versus 20 grams, right? Same amount of protein across the board from all different protein sources across different food groups. Those are all going to have different micronutrients. So the macronutrient might be the same, but the micronutrients are going to be different. It's the same thing with fruits and vegetables, right? Grains and starches, all of these different things. If we take the same amount of carbohydrates from rice versus the same amount of carbohydrates from potatoes versus the same amount of carbohydrates from, whatever it is, all these different carbohydrate sources, those micronutrients are going to look different. And so we need variety to get all of those things. Broccoli is a wonderful source of calcium, right? It's not as high of a source of vitamin C. Bell peppers, great source of vitamin C, not as high a source of, calcium. So eating broccoli every single day, yes, I've got my vegetable servings, I'm doing it. But you're going to miss out on all the other things that are in other vegetables. The next piece is flexibility. Flexibility is nourishing your body as best you can in any situation. So that might mean it's 5 o'clock, I'm not super hungry, but I know that I have something from 5 to 7 p.m., right? For me, it would be I'm volunteering to run an alumni group. So I know I'm going to be hungry during that time. So I should probably eat now. Right? I'm going to nourish my body as best I can in this situation. I'm going to be flexible. Would I prefer to eat, in an hour when I'm probably feeling more hungry? Yes. But I would rather a client or anybody really to nourish their body adequately with balance and variety as best they can, right? Than not nourish the body at all. So that's kind of flexibility, right? Flexibility is I really wanted to have an apple with peanut butter for my snack, but I don't have it. I'm out of apples, right? I guess I have to try something else. That's flexibility. I'll have something else. You're not going to run to the store every time you're out of apples and peanut butters, that minute to get that snack, right? You're just going to try something else, which flexibility to some people can be a very advanced skill. And to others, it can sound like, well, duh, no brainer, right? Depends on where you're at. Then the last piece is enjoyment. So we should be enjoying our experience with food and in nourishing our body. Joy is a nutrient. You've heard it here, right? Joy is a nutrient. Being able to enjoy the experience is part of someone's nutritional status. And so what does that mean? Some people might say food that tastes good, right? I enjoy the taste. They might say it smells good, or the textures are pleasing, or the experience, the atmosphere is good for me. Or they might say, well, I enjoy expressing myself creatively through cooking. That's how I enjoy it. And if the meal comes out not so great, which happens sometimes, the meal comes out not so great, I still got to enjoy the experience, and that's valuable to me. So all of these things are important when we're nourishing our bodies, and this is the place to start. Everything ties back to this, right? Why is there research that says, processed meats, right? This is a project I had to do. And I've never forgotten it. Processed meats, people who eat them for all their meals every day, they get different are at higher risk, and they see more incidence of gastrointestinal cancers later in life. Does this mean that processed meats cause those cancers? If a person is eating the same kind of protein, right, for all of their meals, right, or as the majority of their diet, what are they missing out on? Variety. Why is variety important? Because of those micronutrients that are so valuable. So the logic feels clear, right? To say, they ate this and then this happened. But maybe we need to start thinking about what weren't they eating? Actually, they weren't getting a variety of micronutrients through eating a variety of protein sources. And then they developed these health outcomes later. Maybe that is actually to blame, because we consistently see, right? Hey, we gave a person this food, whatever it was, a ton of it for a long period of time, and these negative health outcomes happened, and we blame the food. But actually, if we pull it back into this nutritional priorities pyramid, we can say, no, what's really happening here is this is a person who isn't getting a variety of essential nutrients that they need, right? These micronutrients that they need. So balance is very important. Even if we make it a balanced diet, if you're still eating, right, that same plate every day, or that same thing almost every day, you're missing out on the other micronutrients that are available, right? The other vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals from plants, right? Amino acid balancing, dietary fatty acid balances, all these different things. You're missing out on these. So just a kind of a seed to plant when you're thinking about, or you're reading these sensational health claims of, they ate this every day and they got really sick. Yeah, it's not because they ate that every day. It's because they didn't eat anything else and their nutritional status suffered. And when your nutritional status suffers, you have these negative health outcomes, because we need adequate nutrition to build, repair, and grow and develop our bodies. So the makings of an adequate and balanced meal. I like to start here after we build some perspective and some context regarding health and nutrition. We look at the nutritional priorities pyramid and we start thinking about all of these things during our day. Then I usually like to just take it to the basics and talk about adequacy and balance, right? Starting there with some perspective for how important variety, flexibility, and enjoyment can be, and trying to add those in when we can. So what are the makings of an adequate and balanced meal? Getting enough proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, having all of those things and all of those food groups in a variety of food sources with flexibility and enjoyment. So carbohydrates, what are they and what do they do? I don't know if you've heard of simple carbs or complex carbs. They're named those things because of, I'm pretty sure, biochemistry, right? So this single hexagon here that says glucose / sugar is a simple molecule. That's a simple carb. This one on the right here, this one says a starch, a complex molecule. It has all these hexagons strung together with all these different chemical bonds, right? That's a bunch of sugars linked together with chemistry, making a complex molecule. So that's why they're called simple carbs and complex carbs. I don't really care about biochemistry when it comes to nourishing my body. I care about it from like a, clinician point, but when it comes to actual practice in my everyday, I'm not thinking about chemistry, right? So simple and complex carbs don't really help me. I like to think of them as fast and slow energy sources. So a simple carb is going to give us fast energy because that sugar molecule, that glucose molecule is right there and available for me to just absorb. Whereas a complex carb, these links of them put together, we have to break them apart first before our bodies can absorb that glucose and utilize it for energy. So that energy comes to us a little bit more slowly. So fast or slow energy, that's carbs. That's what they do. That's a simple or a complex. They are going to provide energy for every organ system in the body, every tissue in the body. I read all the books I could find. I tried to find something that didn't utilize glucose for energy or have a pathway to utilize glucose from carbohydrates for energy. I couldn't find anything. I didn't want to say it if I didn't triple check myself. All of it, all your cells on a cellular level. So your organs need glucose for energy, right? Specifically your brain. It's the primary fuel source for your brain. Your red blood cells, it's the primary fuel source for your red blood cells, is glucose from carbohydrates. But every organ system, and actually down to a cellular level. So all of your cells, not just the organs at large, but each individual cell is going to utilize glucose for energy. Another kind of nice thing to remember about carbohydrates is that they're stored in your muscles as well. I have in here that they're stored for endurance, but they're also just stored for kind of anytime that you need energy. Now you need to tap into those reserves, right? You're, running some distance, right? Why do people say I'm going to eat some carbs the night before? Because my muscles are going to store those up. And then when the energy that I have from the meals I've eaten that day is used up and I'm still running, I can tap into those stores in my muscles and use those. My body will find those and use those up. I have here also, what is fiber and what does it do? So I said, we need proteins, fats, and carbohydrates for a balanced meal. Specifically, I like to talk about fiber, which is a kind of carbohydrate. It's one of the things that helps a complex carb be a complex carb. Usually it's because it contains fiber. Americans are not necessarily deficient in carbohydrates as a generalization. However, as a generalization, they are generally deficient in fiber, that specific kind of carbohydrate. So I like to talk about fiber, kind of highlight it too when I talk about nutrition. So fiber helps promote it is the morning. Fiber helps promote regularity in the gastrointestinal system. It regulates our cholesterol levels, right? So why do oats help why are oats shown to lower cholesterol when eaten, as a part of a, consistent balanced diet? They're high in fiber. So it's the fiber there that's helping, right? So we can also say that fruits and vegetables also high fiber, sources of fiber. Those are also going to help your cholesterol, right? Things that have fiber in it. So it's not just oats. Helps regulate cholesterol levels, helps support detoxification and elimination. So why do you think I'm talking about fiber when I'm talking about recovery-focused nutrition? Because detoxification and elimination of all those things that we're detoxifying and getting them out of our body is so important in recovery. Fiber also helps us to feel full, and it can help to balance our blood sugar if you're struggling with blood sugar instability or dysregulation. Thinking about carbohydrates that are higher in fiber can be a better choice to support that system. So I love this. This is a cool graph about, so we've got satisfaction or maybe energy, right, over hunger or time. And so this first piece here, it says sugar, right? So let's think about that as a simple carb. So this is how a simple carb is nourishing us, right? So it's giving us this much satisfaction over a short amount of time, right? We're going to experience hunger. It's not going to keep it at bay for very long. So that's that first piece. Those are simple carbs, right? When I say they give us fast energy, it is giving me energy now, right? It is helping to make me feel full and satisfied and not hungry for a small amount of time. Then I also talked about complex carbs. That's this guy right here. So this one is, again, right, it takes a little bit longer to break down that complex molecule. So we're going to get energy a little bit more slowly because a couple processes have to happen before we can absorb and utilize that glucose. It's going to nourish us for a little bit, then it's going to start to peter out. So complex carbs and starches, those guys aren't going to give us energy immediately. They're going to give us energy a little bit slower than the simple carbs. And they're going to sustain us for, a little bit of time. So for me, for example, if the simple carb is a candy bar, that first peak, and the second one is starch, right? Let's say that's rice. Let's say it's brown rice, right? A complex carbohydrate. That's how those two things are going to nourish me. So I don't know if any of you have heard like diet culture say simple carbs are bad, sugar's bad, right? Complex carbs are better. I don't know how you can grade one of these as being better or worse than the other. They just nourish you differently, right? So, I mean, the fact that sugars give us quick energy and don't really sustain us for very long, I don't know how that is like morally better than a different food source that's not going to give us energy as quickly and only sustain us for the amount of time that it's meant to sustain us, right? So for me, like I said, if the first one's a candy bar, it's probably, if I have one of those when I'm feeling hungry, it'll probably keep me for, 30 to 60 minutes before I feel hungry again. If the second curve, let's say, is brown rice, right? That's probably going to keep me full again for maybe like 60 minutes or 75 minutes or so the first one's keeping me, satisfied for about 30. The starch is going to keep me satisfied. This is me personally, right, for about 60 minutes. That's just how they nourish me. I don't think being nourished for 30 minutes versus being nourished for 60 minutes makes something better than the other, right? If I need energy now, if I'm crashing, I might reach for some sugar. I just know that I can't only have a candy bar unless I'm about to eat something in maybe 30 minutes and I need to just kind of give myself a little kick before lunch, right? So they just nourish us differently. One is not better than the other. They are just nourishing our bodies differently, and different activities in different situations do require different kinds of nourishment. So the next piece here, what is a protein and what does it do? Proteins are utilized for structure and function in the body. They are a building block for every organ system and tissue in our body. They make up our muscles, our bones, our hormones, enzymes. Every body tissue needs proteins to build, repair, and maintain that organ system, that tissue, those cells. Proteins are also carriers for essential compounds in all of the body, right? So what carries oxygen in our body? Red blood cells, proteins. What enzymes, right? And hormones, those are messengers, proteins, right? We utilize proteins to make, maintain, build, repair those things. Antibodies for immunity, they're made of proteins. So when we're not getting adequate protein in our diet, we might maybe get sick a lot because our body is not able to produce those antibodies. We may have reproductive dysfunction, right? Maybe irregular periods or mood swings. Yeah, because those hormones we need proteins to make those hormones too. Proteins also can help us to balance our blood sugar if you're having blood sugar dysregulation, and they help meals and snacks fuel us for longer. So if carbohydrates are giving us energy now, proteins are what help that energy kind of stick with us. So let's look at that. This cool little picture on the side here. The other cool thing about proteins is in our cell membrane. So this orange circle represents a cell, right? Embedded in that membrane are proteins. So those are the things. The cell membrane helps to keep the stuff that's supposed to be in the cell, and out of the cell, out of the cell. But how do we get things in that are meant to come in, right? And that's what proteins do. Proteins, so insulin is something that signals to the cell, open up and accept some glucose. So the proteins find that insulin, they say, haha, I have to open up, right? The glucose can come in, and the cell can get energy from that glucose. So how do proteins and carbohydrates work together, right? Why do I say that proteins help us balance our blood sugars, and why do they help them stick with us? Because we need the carbohydrates for energy, but we need the proteins to utilize that energy on a cellular level. So looking at this guy again, right? We're going to get some energy quickly from those carbohydrates. Then the proteins are going to come in and they're going to help something stick with us. So if I'm having, let's say, an apple with peanut butter, right? The apple is going to be that carbohydrate, those sugars and starches, and the peanut butter has the proteins. That's going to nourish me for that much longer than if I had eaten the apple by itself, or if I have some rice with some chicken, maybe, for a snack or even for a meal, if I'm talking about a meal, right? The rice is going to nourish me for a certain amount of time, but then adding that chicken in is going to nourish me for that much longer. It's going to help that meal stick with me. And so what is fat and what does it do? Fat is also important for structure and function in the body. Our fat tissue, so eating dietary fats and our actual fat tissue or adipose tissue in the body are different. But I talk about them at the same time because people usually ask me questions about them at the same time. So those things are different. But so our fat tissue, right, is utilized for insulation and protection in the body. But interestingly enough, dietary fats also help insulate things in our body, mainly our nervous system. So if our nervous system is an electrical system, and we were to think about electrical systems that we know maybe in the world, right, in our home or something, all of those wires are not just bare, they're insulated so that that electricity goes to where it needs to go, right? Goes from point A, travels along that wire that is insulated so the energy doesn't, right? And gets where it needs to go. Our nervous system is very similar. Our nerves, because our nervous system is an electrical system, they need to be insulated so that that energy gets to its target. And fats play a primary role in insulating the nervous system. Fats are also a building block for hormones and other tissues. So our brain is 65%, built 65% of our brains on fats. So we need proteins too, but we need fats, right? We need carbs to fuel our brain, and we need proteins and fats to build and maintain our brain tissue. Fats are also the backbone of all of our steroid hormones, our reproductive hormones, our stress hormones. We need fats to build those and have regular responses. So if you feel like your stress response is dysregulated, you may or may not be getting enough, right, balanced and adequate fats in your diets. If you feel like your reproductive system is dysregulated, if you have signs and symptoms of that, maybe you're not able to build those hormones appropriately, or maybe you're not breaking them down and eliminating those metabolites, right? Maybe you're not getting enough fiber. So that's the cool thing about nutrition, is that it's easy to say this is the best and this is better and this is the most important, right? But when you really start to think about it, every single nutrient works together, right? So we need fats to build those hormones, right? Build reproductive hormones. But we need fiber, right? Carbohydrates to help us when we've detoxified and broken down those hormones, when they've done their job and they need to get broken down. We need fiber to help us eliminate those excess hormones. So all of these things are playing together, right? And on top of it, we need proteins also to help build those hormones and help maintain those systems and all of these things. So they're all the most important, right? Everything's the most important in nutrition. And anybody who kind of tells you, no, this is the one, is sort of losing sight of the bigger picture, in my opinion. So what do I have here? I have a picture of a cell, right? The orange is the outside. Underneath that cell, I have a close-up of the cell wall. So the cell wall is primarily fats. Those blue parts are fats. And then we've got some proteins in there too, right? So when you mix oil and water, it separates, right? So why would wrapping all of our cells in fat be important? Because it helps keep the fluid that needs to be in the cell, and it helps keep the fluids that are meant to be outside the cell, right? Exactly like oil and water. It keeps those fluids separate. Otherwise, all the fluids would, mix all together and we'd be all loosey-goosey mushy. So we need that distinction to be made. But then if the fats are keeping things separate, what do we see here? We see these big chunks in the membrane here. Those are those proteins, right? Those are those proteins. And then, oh, goodness me. Those are those proteins. And then what do we also see? We see these carbohydrate chains, right? Linking up to these proteins to try to be utilized by these cells. So all of these nutrients, it's really, really interesting. And clearly I'm fired up, right? I always get fired up talking about it. It's my favorite thing. But all of these nutrients are working together kind of on a systemic level as a whole, right, in what we're eating, but then we can also see them on a cellular level doing the exact same thing. So all of these things are important. And then fat right here, fats at the end. So carbohydrates, what do they do for us? We know what they do in our body, but what do they do for us kind of anatomically? What's their purpose, right? To give us energy now. Proteins, we know what they do in our body, but what's the point of the meal? What can we think of the meal? This protein is going to help this meal stick with me. Then fats. What are fats doing? We know what they're doing for our body, but what do I have to think about the importance of the meal? A fat, look at this guy, right? Satisfaction. I'm pointing to the screen. You don't know what I'm pointing at. The fat, right? Look at this guy right here. The fat is keeping us satisfied. So fats help us to feel satisfied. So I get clients who say, oh, I bought the fat-free cookies and then I ate the whole box. I'm really struggling with binge eating. Well, hold on a minute. Fat is the thing in the food that helps us to feel satisfied. So let's not shame you here. You did exactly what your biology knows to do, right? You never got this feeling of being satisfied, and so you didn't stop eating. So the signal to stop eating comes from, we have receptors in our gastrointestinal system that activate, that give us a satisfaction response. We also have receptors in our stomach that for stretch, okay, our stomach is full. That tells our body, okay, our stomach is full. We need both this feeling of fullness and the experience of satisfaction for the, okay, I'm going to stop eating response to happen. And so why do eat fat-free diets really struggle with, I'm binging, or I'm not eating, I feel like I'm eating too much, or, I bought the fat-free thing and I ate the whole thing. Yeah, because they're not getting the full and complete signal that says it's time to stop eating, because they might be feeling full, right? In my own struggles with eating, I, decided to eat fat-free, and I would eat salads without any dressing or anything, just dry lettuce and whatever. And I'd eat bowls and bowls and bowls and be so full and be like, why can't I stop eating? Yeah, because I'm not getting a satisfaction feeling. And that, again, why is joy a nutrient? Why is enjoyment on that priorities pyramid? Because it's a part of our nutritional status. It's baked into our biology. We need to feel satisfied by our food to also get that strong response that it's time to be done now. So all of these things are super important. So macronutrients, a simple guide to macronutrients. Carbohydrate sources, right? Fruits, vegetables, grains, right? Whole grains and simple grains, those are fine. They're just going to nourish you differently, right? One acts like a fast energy, one acts like a little bit of slower energy. Things that give us carbohydrates and proteins, beans, lentils, right? I think these are split peas, different vegetables. This is not in any way, shape, or form exhaustive, so feel free to make your own of foods that you eat regularly. I use this all the time with anybody in recovery to think about building an adequate meal, right? Okay, why don't we pull one thing from all of these categories or get a twofer, right? Split peas, you're going to get carbohydrates and proteins. We've got proteins in the center, animal proteins, and then we've got some overlap. Dairy, right? Fatty fish, eggs, nuts and seeds, and then we've got fats on the end. So this is a kind of overview. Feel free to utilize this or make your own. I also think about this plate approach. Everybody starts with a plate when they're nourishing their body for the most part, maybe a bowl, or maybe you're eating on the go, I don't know. Thinking about the distribution, right? So this might be, if I'm eating a salad, probably half my plate is fruits and vegetables. Quarter of it is going to be some kind of proteins. A quarter will be like carbs and starchy carbs. There'll be fats and oils. Maybe I'll have some dairy and I'm going to have some water, right? This is one iteration of a plate for me, depending on the meal. But then we have these other plates, right? And this is from Plate by Plate Approach. They've got really cool resources, but these are some other plates, and these are some other different meals, right? This plate that has, half with grains and starches. If I'm eating macaroni and cheese, my plate's probably gonna look like this. I love macaroni and cheese. It feels appropriate to me for half my plate to look like that. Maybe some fruits and veg and some proteins, right? Or maybe you have a bowl and everything's all mixed up in there. Maybe I chop up some chicken and throw in some green peas. It's one of my favorite meals. And all of these are okay, but if you want to start with one, right? But just think, right? What does my distribution of food look like here? And these three are all really great. And there are, of course, some other ones in between. A couple other little things to think about as we wrap up, additional considerations for substance use and eating disorder. Frequent meals, 3 to 4 meals every day. Have some snacks 1 to 3 times daily, right? This is going to support renourishment and healing. The number one factor in recurrence is cravings. So this signal in your brain that says, I have a need, I have a need, I have a need. So eating frequently, especially when you hear that need, you're reaching for your substances, right? Habitually, you're not taking the time. Your brain is not taking the time to think about what is this need for? Is it for food, water, sleep, stress management, whatever it is? It just says substances will meet my needs. Eating regularly is a really passive way to support your recovery because you won't have those alarm bells when my blood sugar's low, right? I'm hungry or whatever it is. You may still feel a little bit of, okay, I feel hungry, it's time to eat, but you're not getting to this extreme point where it's like, I have a need, I have a need. Eating consistently is an incredible way to support your recovery. Emphasizing fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds and meats. Cooking for yourself and others, right? Some really cool information about lactose intolerance development. So substance use, right? The priority to survive is to detoxify and eliminate the toxic substances that you're putting in your body, right? The substances that hurt your body. And so other processes get turned off so that those processes can be prioritized. And one of them is our ability to digest dairy, right? Our ability to produce the enzymes to digest dairy. So some people in early recovery might find that they're not digesting dairy properly. And that's sometimes it comes back and sometimes it doesn't. Cooking for yourself and others, right? These are all really, really great things on top of these nutritional basics. Similarly for eating disorders, right? Eat regularly and consistency, cook for yourself and others. All foods fit. Have variety, right? Explore that. For caffeine, one more quick piece. Limiting caffeine. I know people always want to throw things at me when I talk about this, but caffeine, it is habit forming. And so if you're ever in a situation where you're unable to get that caffeine, what happens in your brain, right? You do start to get those alarm bells. I have a need, I have a need, I have a need. And that's what a craving looks like, right? And when you hear I have a need, what do? You reach for your substances. So if you can, limiting your caffeine to 0 to 3 cups a day is a good way to, if caffeine is scratching kind of that same itch as your substances, 0 to 3 cups per day is a more, I think, middle of the road recommendation. But if drinking coffee helps you in your recovery and keeps you, if you need 6 cups of coffee to stay in your recovery, I have no judgments about this, right? I have no judgments at all. More power to you. I just wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring this information forward, right? Functional foods for recovery for substance use disorder. So these ones here, right? I'm sort of reiterating what I said earlier, which was whole grains, fruits and vegetables, meats, nuts and seeds, right? All of these vitamins and minerals on the bottom here are things that are depleted in substance use because they're very, very important for those detoxification and elimination pathways that are running full steam 24/7. And so they become depleted. And so these are different foods that have higher amounts of those nutrients. So just thinking about those and adding them in when you can. Chocolate. I have a whole slide dedicated to chocolate. I won't read this to you. So you're more than welcome to, take a picture or whatever it is. But I mean, chocolate is incredible for recovery, it turns out, right? And it's not because it's sweet either. So dark chocolate is a little bit more supportive than milk chocolate. People who had about a 1 ounce serving regularly had greater rates of abstinence after detox at 1, 6, and 8 months compared to control. So 84% of people. So there seems to be a group of people where dark chocolate may be supporting their recovery. And I love these passive, here's your nutrition prescription, right? Have some dark chocolate every once in a while and it can support your recovery. I love this. Similarly to the substance use, these are some functional foods for recovery for eating disorder as well. So again, the bottom here, I'm talking about specific nutrients that we see being deficient in eating disorders. And then on the top, food sources of them. Eating disorder is a little bit less specific because getting kind of all foods back is more of a priority in eating disorders. And substance use, we don't usually see like a loss of entire food groups from people. And in eating disorders, we do. So restoring food groups is really important. We got the speed round at the end, but hopefully you are feeling more supported in recovery for nutrition and utilizing this for yourself and for your patients, for your loved ones, and for your families. So I think we maybe don't even have 1 minute. We're probably at negative 30 seconds, but if there's any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Flores. So much good information. There's a lot of really good questions, but you're right, just to honor everyone's time. What's the best place for if folks want to ask or email you questions? Is this email the best way to get a hold of you with those questions that are still hanging out there?
Oh yeah, you're welcome. So our admissions department is very small, and I actually work in the same office with them. So you're welcome to send it to the admissions department and they'll forward them my way. Otherwise, it's just my first initial A and my last name. So A Flores at sanfordhouse.com. Feel free to send those my way, or you can send them to the admissions team for me, this email on the screen.
Fantastic. And Dr. Flores has been really great in offering to share her PowerPoint. So some of you asked if this was going to be available. So in about 3 to 5 days following this webinar, we're going to have on the website for the Recovery Summit on sccmh.org, where you went ahead and register. We're going to have the PowerPoint presentation there. Also on our CMH YouTube channel, we're going to have the recording in about 1 to 2 weeks. So if you wanted to recommend this to someone else or go ahead and watch it again, that will be available as well there. So great. So in closing, we want to certainly thank Dr. Flores for all of the information, the energy. It's very clear that you're very passionate and very excited and just really willing to share a lot of information on this topic. We greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much, Dr. Flores. And as a reminder, thank you. As a reminder, the Recovery Summit continues to go on all month. This was our kickoff. So Dr. Flores was our first. So thank you so much for being our first. It's going to continue on with different topics and speakers every day. For those of you that don't know, our next presentation is actually after Labor Day. It's Tuesday, September 5th at 9 a.m. It's going to be on the Opioid Settlement Fund, state and local perspectives. So to see the information and register for that or any additional sessions, please visit sccmh.org under the Events tab and the Recovery Summit. And just a reminder, individuals requesting professional credits, you will receive your one-page synopsis of all of your accumulated credits by October 30th via email. And as a reminder, please complete the very short survey. It'll only take you a couple of seconds at the conclusion of the webinar. Thank you again, Dr. Flores. And thank you everyone who attended this morning. Have a great day, everyone.